Good afternoon and welcome to the next session in the Family Business Summit 2020. I'm delighted this afternoon to be able to introduce you to Dr. Giovanna Campopiano from Lancaster University Management School and Dr. Linda Murphy from Cork University Business School, who are doing some groundbreaking research into resilience in family businesses. So without further ado, Linda, Giovanna, over to you, and I will ask some questions as they come in from the floor. And pose some questions throughout. So we look forward to hearing a little bit more about your research and what you've been up to.
Thanks, Paul, and good afternoon. So myself and Giovanna I'm going to introduce the research, what the project's about, and then I'm going to say a little bit about what we found out, and then I'm going to hand over to Giovanna for, to tell us what the academic research is saying and where we kind of see this going. So firstly, I'd like just to say that this is very, very initial. The findings we're presenting this evening are very initial. So I'm going to give a description of the project. I'm going to give a profile of participants. I'm going to provide some kind of evidence and some quotes as to what we found out and what the family business owners are dealing with. And then I'm going to hand to Giovanna for what does the academic research tell us. So I suppose, first of all, where did the idea for the project come from? So initially in May 2019, we decided at a conference that we would host a workshop in Cork, a family firms research workshop. And we decided then that the topic was going to be resilience. As you know, family firms by nature are deemed to, be more adept at managing crisis. Due to their longevity and their commitment to sustainability. So we felt back in May 2019 that resilience would be an interesting theme for our research workshop. Little did we know what was to come. So while that workshop was postponed, and hopefully we will host up to 90 international family business researchers in Cork next October, Giovanna, who was to be a keynote at the workshop, Giovanna and I had a conversation and we said, without being opportunistic, that this was a significant time to be really looking at, how do family businesses adapt? How do they cope with crisis? And, while it's been said in the research that family firms, because of, they have unique resources, empirically, do we really know this? So without being opportunistic, we decided to start, talking to family businesses and to see what was going on. Given the level of the crisis and our consideration for people's time, we agreed that we would have two phases to the research. And again, the first phase, which is ongoing for some participants are finished because when we started, it hasn't been a linear 12 weeks is what I'd say. And I'll say a little bit more about that kind of process now as we go through the findings. So the two phases are to record diary entries for a 12-week period. So our instruction was it can be weekly, bi-weekly, handwritten, typed, whatever suits the participant. And then we're going to leave a period of reflection, and then we will go and interview our participants in greater detail. So the logic behind this was that people could really week by week detail how they're responding, what are the imminent issues, problems, what's going on. And I suppose even back then, we didn't really anticipate where we would be now. So it still is an evolving situation, which makes, I suppose, the research more interesting, but I also think it makes it more important to document exactly how our businesses are responding. So the aim was to explore how family firms are responding to the unprecedented crisis of COVID-19. So what I'm going to describe to you now is our kind of initial findings from the diary entries. Now, just to say in terms of instruction, we were quite, I wouldn't say vague, but we didn't want to be too specific in terms of, what to put in the diary. Some people like to have a very clear-cut instruction, whereas the aim here was that it was the subjective experience. So, it was very much up to the individual what they wanted to include in the diary. So I'm going to go through our profile of participants and give you a little bit of background. And we'd like to say as well, we're so grateful to the participants because it's such a difficult time, and we really do appreciate them taking the time out to do it. And we hope that this will reap some benefits and will yield some interesting results that, we can explore how we use them later. So in terms of the diary entries, they included things, like there was obviously some personal reflections from not getting a hairdresser's appointment to childcare issues and the realities of COVID. What we'll be reporting here is very much around the business element. So the diary entries, we left, very much participants had a free rein is what I'm trying to say. So we have 6 participants, and again, because this is in-depth research, we're not really interested in having huge numbers. The idea here is that we go very much deep into the subjective experience, and we go deep and we draw on what we find out. So our 6 participants were from a variety of industries and sectors and different size organizations. So our first participant, the one commonality is that they're all next gen. So that's kind of interesting, and I think the results reflect that as well in terms of the emphasis that they placed. So you can see our first participant is in the hotel industry, and that business was established in 1987, and they have approximately 80 employees. Now, in terms of the employees, these numbers are fluctuating. So these are the numbers of, pre-COVID, and depending on the level of restrictions, these are the kind of the higher number, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. So the second participant is in the property industry, and that business was established in 1979, and there's 12 employees there. Our third one is in the food industry. They're since 1955, so they would, they'd supply to restaurants, they have their own food manufacturing, and they'd also have a shop themselves. Then our fourth participant is in the food and drink, so it would be a traditional kind of a family-run pub in a kind of a country area in Ireland, and they have 15 employees. And again, that would be, they're down to 2 or 3 now, based on the restrictions. So they were established in 1986. And then our fourth is in the environmental services sector. Now, this participant, it's interesting because in terms of being affected, they won a lot of projects last year. So in terms of the kind of the financial element, isn't as, I suppose, it's not as strong there as for other participants. And then our final one is they're in the medical equipment supplier, and they were established in 1963. They're third generation, and they've over 100 employees. I suppose just to note that they supply medical equipment, but it's all for elective surgery. So they were impacted hugely by the crisis in terms of sales. So I'm just going to take you through now what we found out. So we have a number of kind of common themes. So I'm going to start off with, and these emerged, when we got all the, and we only have 6 participants, but we've got a significant amount of data already. So again, that'll tell us how, our participants really did do themselves justice in terms of, what they reported back to us about, whether it was weekly, monthly, whatever way they kept their diary. So one of the kind of, I suppose, overarching themes, and when we think about what is resilience and, what's important, and Giovanna is going to talk a little bit about resilience, but what our participants were telling us was that, communication was so important and still is as the situation evolves. So this is from our 5th participant, and he says, as the weeks went by and the threat of a lockdown in Ireland looming, my father decided to put together a response team made up of some of the group's senior leadership. And he goes on to say how he felt from the outside communication was good and people were kept in the loop, and that gave me a feeling of reassurance that things were under control. So the communication side is very important. This is just another excerpt from participant 1. And she says, it was my duty and responsibility to support the senior team. This was done by verbally communicating that we will be okay. And the other thing, the communication, was that, people were our priority. And this gave the senior management team comfort and security. Now, our next, I suppose, finding or theme in terms of resilience, how are our family businesses responding? Coping financially at different stages of the crisis is a reality for all participants, except for one who, they would claim that, they had a lot of projects from last year, so they're not as affected. But again, I suppose once the crisis hit, you know, participant 1 tells us, you know, it's been tough working through the outstanding debt the hotel has with creditors. It's hard to keep everyone happy and give them something at the same time. And then participant 2 was saying, you know, I'm very conscious of this, the finances. It seemed unfair to be chasing our debtors and then not paying what we owed. Small businesses rely on each other, and the importance of cash flow is important for every business. This is a quote from our participant number 3. So this is in the food industry. And, you know, this was from his first diary entry where he says, like, financials, like, how was the business going to survive if we stayed open? It wasn't looking good. So this is where all my focus had to go. Payments from customers finally coming through. We'd always had an extremely good relationship with our own suppliers, which was hard earned over the last 60+ years, and they've never put pressure on us for payment. But even with such a good relationship, it's all about protecting it so that when the pressure comes, so that's where the pressure comes in. Businesses have suffered, income has dried up, but it's a very fine line between trying to offer support to long-standing customers and protecting your good name with your own suppliers. So, you know, the financial realities are coming through there for our participants. When we look at how our businesses are responding, you know, and we think about resilience, and as I said, Giovanna is going to say a little bit more, but it is about, you know, how we react and adapt to crisis. So it is adapting. So this is an excerpt from participant 2, and this is very early on again. So those 2 weeks were a bit directionless, but at that time we were just trying to adapt. We are blessed with a great team. They all rode in. I think they knew we were firefighting as we went, but that we would do right by them. So as the situation was evolving, our participants were adapting to the realities. This is from participant 4, who they're in the pub industry. So they actually closed their business. They made a decision to close their business before they even had to close, because they were really concerned about how they could keep their customers, employees and parents safe. So this is the quote. So Sunday the 15th of March, we were closed, right? Wrong. No sooner had we closed the business than when we reimagined ourselves as X out contactless takeaway. So overnight they went from being a sit-in to a takeaway. I logged onto the computer site Canva and designed a rudimentary logo and menu. After all, we had a kitchen full of food and it wasn't going to move itself. All this was announced on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and the response was unreal. Menus were posted on social media with the telephone number for ordering. It started the craziest 2 months of both myself and my brother's lives. And again, that was kind of early on. So I think the 2 months have extended to, we're like 5 or 6 now. So when we think again about, you know, our next theme, and learning is something that is part of the resilience process. So participant 4 says, I feel that as a family business, we are willing to adapt more readily than other business. We're used to doing things for ourselves. For example, the website, that could cost a lot, but I'm determined to grow that side of the business myself. So this participant, and again, this is our participant in the food industry, in the pub, he went and, you know, self-taught how to put the website together, you know, to learn that himself. This is from participant 4. So the last 14 months were not just toil and hardship. We've learned a lot along the way. We've learned that we can provide good, wholesome food for takeaway and cold food to take home to heat and eat when you like. That last bit is just what might get us out of this. Okay, so just that, the learning, and again, about how to get out of this pandemic. So this is from participant 1, and again, it's around the learning. So COVID-19 has shown us how the hotel can adapt to a different leisure market and a different business mix. We are learning so much, and it's fascinating to see how the market responds. We know as owners and the senior management team that the hotel in the future might look a little differently. We've been forced to change, and some of this change is good. A recurring theme in all the diaries is the appreciation of employees. I think every business owner who had to close their doors, you know, and who had to let people go, some of them had to go on the pandemic unemployment, and it was a real tribute when you hear some of them saying that, you know, those staff came back without a heartbeat, and came off the payment just to rejoin their teams, even though there was still a lot of uncertainty. So this is from participant 3. You know, he says the reintroduction of staff members during the week, it was like a family reunion, but the family's not complete yet. We still have a bit to go. And he talks about how proud he was to report such positive happenings to his cocooning parents who've spent a lifetime building this business from very humble beginnings. So this is a quote from participant 4. Meeting face to face with our customers has always been my favorite part of running the business. I miss the camaraderie with our fellow staff, listening to their problems, joy, stories, and they're a real extension of our family. This is another quote, and this is from participant 1. And participant 1, she talks about how she had a staff appreciation day at the end of August, just to really pay tribute to the staff and the Trojan efforts that they made. And I don't have it in the quotes here, but just to say that this participant, in terms of, supporting the staff, and when they reopened in the hotel, she talked about her experience of going and staying there with her own family to give direct feedback on how the stay was, with all the safety regulations in place, and being served up that first meal and giving feedback to the kitchen, to the employees, to the kitchen staff and the waiting staff about how it all went. So, she says, I'm very proud of how the staff in the hotel have managed. It's incredibly tough. They're happy to be back serving guests and giving them our warm welcome. So that was lovely to hear about the Staff Appreciation Day, and that, those efforts were, and that, as I said, that was a recurring theme from all our participants. Innovating. Every person we spoke to, or every diary entry I read, I should say, each week there was signs of innovating. So adapting, changing, little changes, big changes. So this is from participant 3, who they started a home delivery service for their customers. So this business would have a stall in a very well-known location in Cork. It's in the English market. So they would have not delivered to domestic customers before. Obviously, they'd supply restaurants, hotels. So they set up a poultry in motion service. So they now home deliver. So this participant talks about recent conversations with his 2 eldest daughters, who contributed a lot and still are during the pandemic, about the prospect of keeping the poultry in motion going. And the result is that we're going to drive on with it and develop it further. So that was one innovative action and reaction that came out of the crisis. Then when we think about participant 1, from the 22nd of May, so this is the hotel which was closed, but they opened up a food truck for takeaway over the weekends. We had lots of Zoom meetings about this too, the general manager, my father and I. The chefs put so much work into it. It was important for them to have an outlet. It was important for the hotel to get serving and meeting customers away again. So finding that way and innovating, to find a way to serve your customers still. So the food truck was the innovative piece there. This is from participant 4. So this is the family pub. And, they were talking about all the new initiatives. So finding new ways to do business, from making up and delivering picnic boxes to medical centres for medical reps who are unable to take doctors out for lunch. We are beginning to see a path forward through innovation. So I think what's interesting here is that this participant talks about, they've always wanted to develop different sides of their business. And as next generation, and they're, the second generation, sometimes it can be hard to push through ideas. So there was an opportunity through the crisis for the next generation to push through the old adage of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They said, here we have of late realised that the traditional country pub and its role in the community is changing all too rapidly. Issues such as the cheap cost of alcohol in supermarkets and changing consumer habits have made the Irish country pub a much quieter place. So when it comes to the question of reopening, we're asking, what are we reopening as? And he says, once we ask ourselves that question, a whole world of opportunity presents. So this is kind of our final theme. And when I say themes, there's loads of other themes that we could pull out, but I suppose in terms of these occurring for, being common themes across our participants, surviving, resilience is all about surviving. And the commitment to survivability, sustainability is very evident in the data that we've been provided with. So this is from participant 2, who's in a property company. So she says, we're in our 41st year of business and desperately want to see our 42nd. I do sometimes worry that I'm in a denial stage and the world's about to implode, but then I shake it off. I took comfort this morning when I learned a staff member is signing the contract on her first new home. So, you know, that idea that, you know, by hell or high water, we want to get to our 42nd year. Participant 4 talks about, you know, hopefully with government help and the patience of the banks and suppliers that they can survive, whether we can get our turnover up to the level that we can keep the show on the road. And then this is from the same participant. So in Ireland last week, we had our budget. So this participant sent a post-budget reflection because there was some, I suppose, supports for businesses announced. So he said, for us here in the inn, we're pretty happy and all. Our wages will continue to be subsidised into the future. We have the safety net of the COVID restriction support scheme. So that's giving them another little, I suppose, hook for survival that they can hang on to, and hopefully they say, you know, if things don't go to hell altogether, and hopefully they won't. Now, also the vast experience, when I think of the years that these businesses, you know, together are in business, their vast experience is shining through. And again, I think resilience is about that bank of experience. And I think, you know, for family businesses, experience is certainly going to be one of the trump cards. So participant 3 talks about, you know, reflections on the incredible commitment from fellow colleagues. Nothing's a problem, you know, let's just get it done. So, you know, he talks about working with the older generation who placed an enormous importance on how work colleagues are treated. We always work with people no one works for us. So that experience of the older generation in family businesses as well, who may have seen and experienced other crises, you know, is part of the resilience that they're building. Participant 5 talks about, you know, the experience that their management team have of dealing with previous crisis situations. So this does instill confidence in the current generation and employees. And he says, I have full confidence in them to steer us through the next few months, as they have proven their ability to do this in the past. So the history there and coming up with, you know, the experience of dealing with previous and prior crises, you know, both family and business, I suppose we need to point that out, that that's a reality. So I'm going to hand over now to Giovanna to tell us, you know, from the academic perspective. So, you know, what does this mean and what does it tell us?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Thanks a lot. Yeah, indeed, when we looked through these findings and we identified these themes like communication, importance of communication, coping financially, and the experience, learning, and so on, we were also trying to actually reflect on what we have read and what we have discussed and analyzed previously. And I think it's also important to define what we mean with resilience. Maybe some of you could think about resilience or resiliency as an individual characteristic. In reality, what we want to try to identify through this project, though in this preliminary stage, is an organizational resilience. And therefore, we have scouted through the existing literature and trying to define what organizational resilience is. And indeed, what we think about when we talk about resilience is mostly about an ability of a business, of an organization, to actually maintain and continuously regain in a dynamic way a state of the business in order to continuously cope with the stress or any mishap that could happen to the operation and strategies of the business. Or in other terms, what we are looking at is at the actual characteristics of the firms that are able to respond in a quite agile or quick way, to recover fast and to develop new ways of doing business in particular critical times, in critical situations. And this was also very interesting to reflect on some of the quotes and findings that Linda has discussed, like the experience from previous generation, how this might help to actually develop these new unusual ways of doing business. Can you please switch, Linda, to the next slide? Yeah, another interesting definition, but still somehow reflects this idea that anyway, resilience is a business-wise ability, is that by Legnick, Hall and Beck, that define resilience as an ability to avoid, absorb, respond, and recover from situations of change in more general terms. What we really think is important is that this attribute, these characteristics of organization is something that changes over time, that evolves, and involves some dynamic processes like adaptation, absorption of crisis. And therefore, we have embraced, let's say, this perspective and thought about capabilities in a dynamic way. What do we mean with dynamic capabilities? Are these firm level abilities to integrate, build, and reconfigure internal competencies that should help firms, organizations to cope with external changes, to actually navigate the difficulties, the challenges, but also the opportunities that might emerge in the environment of the business. So in a sense, looking at this phenomenon, not so much from a maybe psychological point of view, but really mostly from the resource-based or the use of resources-based perspective should help also understand how businesses change, redesign, rethink about their business model as well. So in line with this debate, in a sense, what we think our preliminary findings could help us discuss, advance, and reflect upon is that, for example, communication, adaptation, learning, evolving could actually be seen as ways through which companies integrate the resources, their strengths, the internal abilities that they have built over time, which is particularly significant for family firms in the second or later generational stages, because in a sense they have at their side a lot of abilities and resources that have been accumulated over time and that now probably they can leverage to cope with the crisis. Anyway, we also find further that innovation, experience that have been built and used during the crisis can help build also new capabilities. So there is this opportunity for family firms not just to rely on what they have built in the past, but also to create or build new capabilities for the business and for the future of the business. And here it comes also this last point that Linda was emphasizing, highlighting about the surviving aspect. So reading through these notes of the participants that were also struggling through these months, these critical months, we can also reflect on how businesses, family businesses need sometimes to completely reconfigure. So rethink about what they have, what are their strengths, but also what might be the opportunities to create new competencies and therefore survive through such difficult times. So in a sense, using or trying to rely on this perspective, we think that we can grasp from these notes and from the preliminary findings of this project new ways to look at family firms and how they build on their existing resources and strengths, how they can create new resources, new capabilities, and overall how they can survive through crisis and maintain and gain their success. So yes, I think this is a little bit the overarching summary of these preliminary findings. We are very happy of what has been identified so far, and we are also happy actually to invite other people to join this project, because we believe this is absolutely a timely moment as well, now that we are observing again some difficult times ahead, where probably taking some time to reflect and take notes on what are the weekly or sometimes bi-weekly challenges that we are facing, that businesses are facing, could be also a good moment, a good timing to really be aware or be more conscious of what are the actual strengths, what might be the future capabilities to build, and how to survive through this quite long crisis.
Giovanna and Linda, for me it's fascinating actually listening to you put into words what you found, and the findings are incredibly honest and real and really resonate. I mean, I've been speaking to a lot of family businesses across the UK in the last few months, and they reflect, your findings clearly reflect the journey that lots of families have been on over the past few months, and are going to have to continue on probably for the next few months and beyond. You mentioned quite a few factors in terms of resilience. Obviously, cash is king. So you kind of have that initial phase, don't you, when the pandemic started, the survival mode, lock up the bank, save cash, and go into kind of initial survival. And then they come through and, as you mentioned, adapt and learn, develop new things. Which stage, in terms of the characteristics that you've been looking at and the definitions that you've used in what resilience is, do you think are the most important?
I think it's difficult to single anyone out, Paul, to be honest, because I think it's a process. There is a process element to resilience, and you know, we're saying it's a dynamic capability. Like, it is emerging, it's evolving, and obviously the financial, you know, is a huge reality. I think in terms of as the weeks went on in the, you know, and as I said, we're early days into this project really, but I think as the weeks went on, you know, and as you said, there's an initial like survival, and there's, you know, the cash is king. And then I think the learning, the you know, I suppose taking the bit of time to think, you know, as one of them put in, you know, what are we reopening as? You know, the reflection, the learning. But I think, you know, each of them had their time, the different stages. And I think, you know, because this situation is evolving, and I mentioned in Ireland, we are now entering into the strictest of restrictions from midnight tomorrow night. You know, we may well be back to the initial stages again, because businesses are closing. So this is, you know, this is evolving. So it's, you know, I think we could be going back through all the stages in no particular order. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you. I think the other thing, I think, in terms of helping businesses stand the test of time, and obviously you mentioned some of the multi-generational participants. The oldest family firm in Britain goes back to 1515, the oldest in Scotland to 1715. So we know that family firms are resilient. But I think what's really interesting from this is it's defining the stages and steps in that resiliency into a way that others can then learn and maybe develop a framework. So God forbid if this was to happen again, there'd almost be a point of reference to think about, actually, this is quite normal. We're going to keep calm, carry on, but we have to think, adapt and innovate and do different things. So I think the process that you're going through in terms of collecting the diaries is fascinating, because they've been incredibly emotive and real and honest, and giving you something really kind of personal to adapt, rather than it just being maybe more of a scientific academic piece around asking people questions based on your our assumptions in terms of what you're asking for. So you mentioned earlier that you're still looking for people to participate, so I'm assuming we can share the details, and then they can get in touch if they're willing to devote some time to helping you.
Absolutely. And I suppose, Paul, when we started this, and you know, some participants started recording maybe June, others joined in August, you know, we weren't sure about where this was going, but you know, what's very clear is like, we're going to be in this for some months to come. So like, there's huge potential for others to join. So we have some, as I said, some participants are finished, some are finishing, some are at earlier stages. So, you know, each participant can go through you know, the 12 weeks, and you know, 12 weeks may sound a bit taxing, but you know, one thing I would say is that participants did, you know, I think there was a value in the whole reflecting. And, you know, one participant said to me, I use it to gather my thoughts on a weekly basis. So it's, you know, they stop and they finish and they close for a few days, and, you know, you think about where you're at. So I think there is an opportunity, and we certainly would welcome anybody else who's interested in participating. I suppose the other interesting thing is, you know, this was our initial phase, and, you know, hopefully after Christmas we'll start doing some of the in-depth interviews, because we will allow a period of reflection. But when we get to the interview stage and we have an interview guide put together, and really what we're looking at, and I'm just bringing you back to your point about the crisis, like what we're going to be asking is, you know, how does this compare to other crises? Because every crisis is unprecedented. So the learning from this and documenting the learning, you know, is very important for family firms. And I think demonstrating, whether that's to policymakers later on, that Giovanna and I look at a way of disseminating this, but just disseminating that, you know, these businesses are here for the long haul. You know, there's a vast amount of experience, knowledge, and a lot of intangible resources built up, and that they can draw on to survive. So you mentioned multi-generations, it's all hands on deck. You know, like we know helping is like a natural activity in family businesses. People help out, and you know, and that's not a transactional. It's a relationship. You know, it's not so that, you know, I'll help out for, you know, whatever. It's actually to keep the business going.
Yeah, to innovate, I would add. Yeah, because sometimes the new ideas, the novelty of what can be done, especially in times of crisis, usually comes from a relative or someone from the new generation. So definitely that's also an important aspect.
Yeah, I think that the whole pandemic for everyone has given people often say they haven't had enough time recently to spend time on their business, that they're just working too hard in it. And admittedly, at the moment, everyone is working 24 hours in their business, but there has been a period of reflection where people have had to take time out and work out what the right strategy is, stop doing certain things and maybe do other things or do new things. And I think it's also given a chance to really give a voice to all generations. So the next generation have been listened to possibly more than they ever would have been over a short period of time. So they may have had their voice heard over the next 2 or 3 years, but actually we haven't got 2 or 3 years. We have to do things now and respond quite quickly. So I think listening to some of your feedback on the next generation has really helped them gain a voice and maybe some recognition for what they can bring to the table in terms of some of these family firms. So hopefully it's the first step of a new path for them within the family firms that will help the longevity too.
And without being pessimistic, I mean, there is another crisis looming, you know, dare I mention Brexit, you know, it's on the
We can't mention the B word today, we're not allowed.
We're not allowed to mention it, but anyway, it's on the cards. And just in terms of, you know, there will be a period of adapting, and, you know, so that's another, I suppose, another reason to maybe think about if there are people interested in participating, you know, documenting that is important as well.
Yeah. And it's going to be the same process for many, isn't it, in terms of taking stock, using your resources in the best way you possibly can to get the best results. So, Linda, Giovanna, it's been really interesting talking to you this afternoon. I really look forward to the full research, and if we can get some more respondents to help you in terms of building the portfolio, then we will do. I look forward to hearing after the interview stage as well, because I think that will shed up some more insights and make it even more relevant to the broader community down the line. So good luck with the research project. I think it's fascinating, and thank you very much for joining us for the summit and taking part today.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks, Paul, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Keep safe and well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.